This is the Jim Feist, Andy Iskoe version of the ATS, Playbook ATS show. Just the two of us, Andy. We're carrying the ball today. We got a lot to talk about. We're going to jump right into, as the background shows you, basketball. We'll talk a little bit about obviously, the NBA, what happened last night. They're up 4 at the half, 48-44. And they lose the game by 26, which is a 30-point second half blowout, which is what I've been talking about. This is unbelievable. Unbelievable how they can play basketball this way. I don't understand. I do understand it. They recruit players that can shoot from the outside. Then they forget to teach them how to play defense and run plays underneath the bucket where they can get some. Because when you shoot the outside shot and you miss it, you basically are giving up any chance of an offensive rebound because all your players are sitting outside. The inside is open for the defenders to get the ball. So it's a whole different ball game. And, of course, that increases the fast break opportunities to the other side because the defense is getting the ball. They can run their play. But the game still did stay under by quite a bit.
Yeah, I was watching the other night. The Knicks and Pacers who play tonight have a nice long history that dates back many, many years. And ESPN did a 30 for 30 a number of years ago. I think it was called something like When the Garden Was Eden, about Madison Square Garden. It actually predates the Pacers and the Knicks developing that rivalry. It goes actually back prior to the NBA ABA merger, which occurred in 1976. I think it was a 2-hour documentary. And they showed the 1969-70 New York Knicks that won the first of their 2 NBA championships. And it was all about team basketball, exactly what you were saying. And they were interviewing players when I forget when they did the documentary. It was maybe about 10, 15 years ago. And they were using clips of interviewing the Knicks players both at the time when it was occurring and then 15, 20, 30 years later in retrospect. And they all talked about the goal that Red Holtzman, the coach, taught the Knicks was always look for the open man, run your offense. Don't be concerned about shooting from the outside. Now, I will indicate that this was before the advent of the three-point shot, but they were always looking to pass the ball. They never wanted, Holtzman never wanted the guys to dribble more than 2 dribbles without doing something with the basketball. And it was considered to be one of the best balanced teams of all time. Yeah, they had Willis Reed, and that was the great moment they replayed. And they had Walt Frazier, who getting lost in that Game 7 of that series against the Lakers in the NBA Finals because of Willis Reed coming out there with, I think it may have been sort of like a torn ACL or something like that he limped on, was Walt Frazier, who had just an outstanding game. I think he had 36 points and 18 or 19 assists. But that was the epitome of the team basketball, Jim, that you're talking about, where you get everybody involved. You don't stand around and watch one guy shoot from the outside and try and get the rebound, and you're exactly right. When you keep taking that many long shots, it's quite possible that, especially if the ball is bouncing off the rim, it's going to bounce over the guys who are there positioning themselves for the offensive rebound and going for a defensive player who's got one eye on where the ball is and one guy on which teammate is racing down court to get his pass. So it's a fundamental difference in the way basketball is played today. And yes, it's 50 years ago. You'd like to think that over 50 years, basketball has evolved. There are some of us who would think it really has devolved. Not necessarily.
I'm in that club. I'm on
and by the way, there's an easy solution. You move the three-point shot out a little bit. It'll be much harder to hit. It won't become as much a focal point of the offense as it currently is today. Yeah, it's exciting, but I don't think 20-point blowouts are exciting for the viewer.
Well, certainly, I don't know how they do the ratings, but I used to buy a lot of advertising on television in my old days. And they would measure the ratings as to what you're going to pay. Like, for example, let's say you get 100 to pay the first quarter, and then as that game devolves, it goes to the point where you're only getting a 12%. So you're only going to pay 12% of your rate instead of 100% of your rate. Mm-hmm. If that's the case now, and I don't know that it is, they're getting killed in the fourth quarter. These games aren't even close.
I guess, let me ask you the question. Do they base what you pay after the ratings are in, or is it based on what the ratings are prior to the start of the game, based upon, let's say, the last book or something?
Well, in the old days, it was after, because they had to measure
Mm-hmm.
what the ratings were at any given time during the game, and that's what you paid, that times the rate. So if, let's say, it was $500 a second, if you're only getting a 12% of viewership in the last 2 minutes, you're paying 12% of that 500.
Right.
So, but if it was 100, then you're paying the 500.
Full amount.
So that was the old days. I don't know how
Yeah.
it is today, because I haven't bought any television advertising in a long time. But I would imagine it's along those lines, because you're not getting anybody watching those games in the last
Well,
2-3
I
minutes.
think we were talking about it the other day, because what was happening is exactly right in some of the games that we were talking about. And I'd have to believe, with technology evolving, they probably can do ratings for like
Oh
any,
yeah.
let's say, 15-second segment of each minute of each game action. The thing that we were talking about before is, and this goes to your point, is that if it's a blowout game in the third quarter, okay, like last game was, well, it really wasn't yet. It was starting to be, because I forget what the number was. They outscored them, I think, by 16 in the fourth quarter. So they still had like an 8 or 10 point lead after 3. But the point is, as it gets to be a blowout in that third quarter, TV sets are going off. They said, oh, this game's over. And then all of a sudden, they may be following it on their computers or on their phone or something, or somebody else is following it on their TV or whatever, their device. And it gets to be competitive. Like, again, we'll talk about the Knicks and the Pistons in that first game, where the Knicks went on that 21-0 lead in the fourth quarter. Well, maybe nobody's watching at that point, or at least at the point where that's a bad example, only because they were down by 8, so it's still competitive, and they came back and took a big lead. But let's take a look at some of the other games let's take a look at the Knicks blowout in Game 5 of the Celtics, where the lead kept getting larger. At the point is that in the middle of the third quarter, it's a 23-point, 25-point lead. Nobody is watching. So, to your point, if you're advertising at that point, you're not paying much, because you're not getting much viewership. Then all of a sudden, somebody says, "Oh, look at this run that Boston is on." When it wasn't on, but this is the example. Now all of a sudden, instead of a 23-point game, it's a 7-point game with 10 minutes to go. Now people are flocking back to their TV sets. But then again, you have to wonder. Let's say 100,000 people, as an example, turn their sets off when the game was a 23-point rout with 4 minutes to go in the third quarter. Of those 100,000 people, even though the game is getting closer, I'm sure a significant portion of those people had just given up. And instead of having the 100,000 that you'd like to have in a competitive game, maybe you're getting only 60,000 watching. So yeah, they have to be hurt by the ratings, because these games that maybe some of them do have great comebacks, for a good part of the second half, these games are getting blown out, and people are switching channels or turning it off totally.
We've had
And
three
can't
straight.
like that.
We've had 3 straight favorite winners, all blowouts. Going back to the Boston, going back to the Thunder, and now again the Thunder here. So that's 3 straight blowout winners that pretty hard to watch at the end. Let's try to make some money for the people tonight. We've got in the NBA, we got the Indiana Pacers visiting Madison Square Garden. New York Knicks are 4.5. That's what it opened. That's what it is. It hasn't moved. The total was 220.5. It's 224.5 in many spots.
Yeah.
And you might be able to find a 22.5 at some other or 23.
I'm just seeing a lot of recent activity as my screen's lighting up in colors on the total in that game. I'm showing pretty much 223.5 across the planet.
Okay, so there's a game where you have the Knicks. I mean, Indiana is a very fast-paced team, kind of like OKC in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Not as many wins on the season, but Indiana has been a hot team since January, February. The Knicks are grinders, and they have the best closer. They call him Mr. Clutch, Jalen Brunson.
Mr. Clutch 2.0. I think Jerry West was number 1.
Well, we'll talk about this. We'll talk about this generation.
Yeah.
Brunson is just impossible to stop at the end of the game. He might get you 40 in a slow-paced game. He can still get you 40. He's a very difficult guy to play. But that is a hell of that New York is absolutely going to go bonkers if they could win this series. The Pacers, Well,
I believe last year they met in the semifinals and Indiana won in 7 games. So there's every reason to expect this to be competitive because I think both teams are better than last year, and I think that we can see some very competitive games as far as not seeing blowouts. So you never know, but these teams seem a lot more evenly matched than some of the games that did result in blowouts.
when we go to tomorrow's game in the NBA, we go to Minnesota playing again from last night. It's a replay of last night. Minnesota at Oak City, pretty much the same line, 7.5, 214.5. Pretty much across the board. You might see some 13.5s on it as well. What the hell does Minnesota do after watching that game? First of all, they got to learn how to play defense, which they don't seem to play. And is Minnesota capable of beating this team, or is Oklahoma City really as good as what they showed in the regular season? They didn't, my contention along the way when they were playing Denver is actually Denver man for man for the first 5 was actually the better team because of Jokic, mostly Gordon, Braum, Murray, especially, Murray. Porter, when he was healthy, he had the shoulder, but he still played well. But they had no depth. And people coming off the bench was the best guy they had coming off the bench was Westbrook, and he is so hit and miss.
Erratic. Yeah.
Well, that's an understatement. You look in the dictionary, his face is there. But against Minnesota, they don't have a guy like Jokic. They don't have a Gordon. They don't have a Braun. They all have great players. Don't get me wrong. The best athletes in the world are playing basketball. When they want to play, they're unbelievably good. So I'm not knocking their talent. I'm knocking how they do play. They play different styles. I mean, you got Minnesota with tons of talent, but OKC is proven all year long the top-rated team in basketball. Now, the 2 next teams that were rated highly were the Cavs and the Celtics, and of course, they're gone. So now you're back here. Is the zigzag theory in place here with Minnesota, or are we going to look at a repeat of Oklahoma City doing what they did last night?
Well, a couple of things that come to mind. Number one, Minnesota look, they had a 4-point lead at halftime, so we know that they can compete. And then all of a sudden, they couldn't handle what Oklahoma City was doing in the second half. And what they score? I think they scored. Maybe under 40 points in the second half, if I recall correctly, with the same personnel. The thought I have is that in the regular season, for whatever it's worth, I don't believe these teams met since late February, and because I think we talked about it on the basketball show we did the other day, that they played back-to-back games at the end of February. I think those are the last 2 they met, and I think they exchanged like 8 to 10 point victories. They were competitive, and I think the 2 earlier meetings that occurred in the season, they were also competitive splits. I think one was a 7-point game, the other in 6. So we knew that that they had been able to compete against each other, and of course, both had playoff experience last year, especially Minnesota, which ended up losing in the Western Conference Finals. So we know that they're capable. Yeah, we know that they have John Randall in there now from the Knicks in that trade with Karl Anthony Towns going over to New York, who's made a difference over there, certainly strengthened that team. As far as this game goes, I wonder how much of a distraction, and we'll never really know, but I'm sure you've seen the reports about Rudy Gobert splitting up with his girlfriend recently. She's pregnant or something, and they're trying to work out some sort of resolution. She wants to go back to, I think she's from France or something, and he doesn't want her to go back because of custody things. That has to be affecting you somehow at certain points. You try and block it out of your mind, but during timeouts or slow plays in the action, you're sitting on the bench taking a 2-minute rest. It's got to be affecting you, and you have to wonder how that's going to be affecting him throughout the series, and if that had any impact last night, because you saw 2 different Minnesota teams in the first half and the second half. The first half is the Minnesota team that had been playing the way we had seen them play over the last part of the season and throughout the playoffs, but you couldn't recognize that team in the second half. I ended up, I don't remember whether it was you or another show that I did the other day where I said, I'm looking at taking Minnesota in the first half. And then I thought about it, and I took Minnesota in the first half. I think it was +4.5. And I also took them for the game because these 2 teams there's a certain amount of familiarity, as much familiarity as you can have playing 4 times a year. But just the talent suggests that, yeah, Oklahoma City's a better team, but Minnesota's got some things that they do as well. So I cashed the first half bet, and I expected the second half bet to be competitive as well. Of course, it wasn't. So we know Minnesota can play as well against them. They just have to do it for 48 instead of 24 minutes. So I'm going to be on Minnesota again in game 2. Don't know that I'm going to play them in the first half, because I think we'll see a different dynamic based upon the results of the first half. Fatigue did not seem to. If I thought fatigue was going to be a factor, it might have been in that first half for Oklahoma City when Minnesota was able to get out to that lead. But I think that factor is pretty much gone now, as far as having played a game and seen the opponent and learned game plans and things like that. So I think Minnesota has the talent to make the adjustments. It's just a question of will they be able to. Oklahoma City had so many blowouts at home this year that even though the game handicap is competitive, with what we've seen throughout the playoffs, maybe it wasn't that much of a surprise last night. I do know a number of people who did like Oklahoma City last night. And again, I could not disagree with anyone who liked them in Oklahoma City last night, and I can't disagree with anybody who likes them again in game 2. I'm going to go play the competitive and the roster comparisons. I'm taking the 7.5, 8 points with OKC.
Well, that's tomorrow. I'm going to look
with Minnesota.
I'm gonna look at tonight's game. I'm going to go with the Knicks on the money line in this game, because when I got a short favorite, I usually stay away from laying the 1, the 2s, the 3s, and the 4s, and I go with money line plays. So I'm going to go with Knicks win this game, but I could see it being very close. I'll deal with tomorrow, but I'm going to switch off here a little bit.
Well, by the way, Jim, let me ask you, because that money line has gone up nicely. It's now about 185 to 190 on the Knicks tonight, which seems to be a lot. Seems to be baked in a huge difference between that and what normally it would be for a point spread, where the Knicks are only a 4.5 point favorite, for it to be almost 2 to 1 on the money line.
Well, that's one of the things I look for when things are out of line versus the point spread versus the money line, because I know a lot of guys that do exactly what I do, and they're not going to lay the 4.5, and they're going to come in there and they're going to take the money line to win the game, because they're expecting a competitive game.
Is that what they would? Was that what you would do, or they would do? Let's say hook it up with a $2 favorite in baseball, or just play it straight and risk the 2 to 1.
Well, these guys are pretty large bettors, and I'm trying to find the next thing here. I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but yeah, they do. They just play what they want to play on it. They'll lay the 180. It's just like playing any other sport. It's a hard one to lay, because you're laying, well, if you're a big player, 18,000 to win 10, it's a big number. But so in that regard, I
guess when you're playing in volume, that's okay, especially at that side, because let's say if they lose tonight, it takes 2 wins just to compensate for the loss.
That's right. That is right.
But if you're dealing in volume, if they're, and I'm sure a lot of these groups do, they'll play 15. Well, it's not that many games out there, but let's say even if you throw baseball in there, sides and totals, they'll play 10, 15 games, and they'll play the percentages. They say, let's say we'll play 15 games and we're going to go 9-6. We don't know which 9 will win and which 6 will lose, but if we go 9-6, we're going to get the profit that we expect to get, even when we're laying big numbers or big amounts.
Let's go over to another basketball situation. We've got the WNBA, which started this week. Interesting games. We did see Caitlin Clark and the Fever actually lose a game last night in their home opener. I
wonder how much the impact of the Angela Reese incident the other day may have been on her mind, may have somehow subconsciously distracted her.
She still had a good game, but I mean, the team they lost to was a pretty good team.
Pretty good, yeah.
And they made some additions in the offseason, so they're not dog meat.
And it was only a 1 point loss.
But still, they were like, the key indicator was in this game. The game opened 10.5 Fever.
Right.
And it went down to 6.5. Now, I personally think that I do pretty well playing WNBA, but I'm going to tell you something. Any line that moves 4.5 points, especially against the Caitlin Clark Fever team at home, I am not going to buck that. I'm sorry, guys. that there's somebody knows something, somebody feels something, somebody has some inside information.
The wise guys were taking the points, and the public was laying them.
Exactly, and I'm not going to be on the public. We have 3 games tonight, so we probably should touch on them really quickly. When I'm going to say this out there, and we have time constraints. This is a live show. There's no recording. Right now we have we got Dallas and Minnesota. Now Dallas is a new team, pretty much. They got Paige Breckers. The game is Minnesota opened. They're 2-0 on the season. Opened 10.5, and the total was 68.5. When I say 68.5, just that's 168.5. Okay? That just I just hate to use the extra word in saying one, but we're looking at pretty much the lines pretty stable on the total, but it's gone up to 12. The Lynx are 2-0. Dallas is 0-2, but Paige is going to be she plays for the Dallas Wings. She is going to be a star. She's young, obviously, just out of college, and she can shoot the hell out of the ball, and she's going to be a star. This Dallas team, hopefully they end up better than the Mavericks did in the NBA as they blew up their whole team.
However, like the Mavericks or like the Dallas Wings, Mavericks have the #1 draft choice.
That does help.
They're going to get Cooper Flagg.
Well, where they trade him for 5 players, that would be about right. Then,
by the way, just as an interruption, normally that might be something that you would talk about in the past, like the big Herschel Walker trade with the Cowboys with 8 players or whatever. But now these days, merchandising marketing comes into play that maybe Cooper Flagg is worth so much in the non-basketball areas of revenue streams that maybe Dallas says we're not even going to entertain. We've already sold X thousand Flag T-shirts or something.
Well, that's a good point, Andy. I mean, there's a lot of money in this selling the swag. They're definitely Minnesota 12 right now across the board, 12.5 other spots. They're looking, and the Lynx are a good team. And remember, the Lynx lost in the championship game last year against Liberty, and there was a lot of controversy about how that game ended. They could have easily won that. You got the Los Angeles team at Phoenix.
By the way, let me just mention about the Dallas-Minnesota game. These teams opened the season against each other last Friday at Dallas. Minnesota actually was bet down from an 8 to a 5-point favorite on the road. They won by 15 points. Then they played again. Of course, Minnesota went in and 5-6 point favorite. They beat the Sparks by 14 in LA on Sunday. So they've got a pair of 2 double-digit road wins as they open their home season tonight. Dallas, in the meantime, they had that 15-point home loss to Minnesota. And then on Monday, 2 nights ago, they lost by 8 at home to Seattle, who was off of an embarrassing upset loss at Phoenix 2 nights earlier when they were 2-point dogs and closed 6-point road favorites, lost by 22. So what I'm looking at here, it's tough to lay big numbers, but we know Minnesota is one of the top contenders. Dallas is still a team in transition. Now, you are laying 11 points. It is Minnesota's home opener. They are number 1, 2, or 3 in the league, depending upon how you want to rank them. And they've already beaten this team by double digits. Now, if the situation were reversed and they played in Minnesota to start the season and Minnesota won by 15, and now they're on the road, and let's say Minnesota is favored in by a little bit less, I probably wouldn't consider Minnesota. But for me, even with the slight movement, it's either Minnesota or pass. There's just that much of a talent difference right now, and Dallas is still finding their way. And now this is their first road game of the season.
Being the first road game is a big issue. No question about it. Minnesota is much more talented and much more experienced. It's in the number. Yeah. It is in the number, but maybe it's not a big enough number.
Well, I'm asking what would the home court advantage be if Minnesota Well, they opened 8, which was apparently too high. They closed as a 5-point road favorite, and now they're an 11-point home favorite. That's a big swing when you go from road to home to neutral. So I'm wondering if that number may not be justified, if that big of a home court advantage based upon. Well, I don't know how much of it is based on the 2 games. However, when you do have a major addition to your team like Dallas did, you do have to make some additions, and maybe the public did that by betting the underdog and not being correct in that first game.
Let me add to that. The public doesn't bet a lot of these games early, and this is WNBA. I mean, it's
Right.
not the NBA. It doesn't have that popularity going down the road. This is mostly sharp money coming in early, and the game opens 10.5. It's 12.5 or 12.
Yeah.
We know what's going on there. Just like last night when they were betting against the Fever. I mean, you got to know when to follow the money and when not to. And the next game is a perfect indication of this. At Los Angeles, and they have Plum now, who transferred over from New York, from the Vegas. And she is a tremendous player. But they're at Phoenix, and Phoenix they opened 2.5 and they're up to 5.5. That's a big move for a rebuilding Phoenix team. Now, it didn't look like Phoenix was going to do much, but then all of a sudden, at the end of the regular of the off season, they added a few players, and they might be a little bit more competitive than people gave them credit for.
Well, the thing that's interesting is go back to that opening game when they played on Saturday at home against Seattle, and Phoenix was a 2-point home favorite. And the money steamed in on Seattle. Seattle went off a 6-point road favorite, and Phoenix won the game going away by 22 points. So the people who bet on Saturday must have thought that Phoenix maybe wasn't as good as we thought maybe those late additions did, because they ended up being bet the other way. A 6-point move or an 8-point move is a huge move, even from an opener. And yet Phoenix ended up justifying the people who did think that they were a good team. I don't know who bet that game, but I have to believe the sharp money was the one that moved a lot of that towards Seattle, and they were really wrong. And sometimes, and Jim, you can know this from experience, that sometimes I'm not going to call it being stubborn, but it's saying, you know what, Phoenix is still the better team, even though they lost badly. We're not going to overreact, and we're going to set a line as if game 1 never even happened. And when they maybe made a little bit of an adjustment in Phoenix, favoring them over, the lines maker made them favorite over the Sparks, they said, no, a lot of people may react. The public may react to that first game, but it's not the public that's moving this game up from 2.5 to 5.5. So my initial thought was, before I saw any line movement, I like this Sparks team, and I think they're only going to continue to show improving. But right now, I have to mark, and it's only one game, but I have to mark Phoenix down as a mystery right now. So I can't play this game.
Well, we are still feeling out process here in WNBA. There's a lot of new players. I think there's 8 new coaches. I mean, It's just that there's a lot of things that we have to watch. So I'm going a little bit slow. I'm doing pretty well, but in it. But I'm not going to go too crazy because of what 1 or 2 game, because they're changing lineups and people are getting hurt. And then now Washington is 2-0 on the season. And they're 5.5 at Golden State. Now, Golden State they're known as the Valkyries, and that is a brand new team. So this is a new addition to the league. There's a lot we don't know about a lot of teams at this moment, but especially this one. So This is a brand new team, new coach, new players, new venue, everything.
And by the way, I believe this is only their 2nd game, if I recall. They opened the season on Friday night at home.
They lost to the Sparks. I think
and Washington,
lost to the Sparks.
Yeah, they did. 84-67. By the way, they're playing a Washington team, which was the team that opened the season with a 4-point home win over Atlanta, the team that not only gave Indiana a good battle last night on the road, but actually beat them. So sometimes it's early in the season, but sometimes you look at these things when you try to make comparisons as far as strength of these teams. But with only a 1 or 2 game sample, it's hard. But it is worth noting that maybe Atlanta is a better team than we thought, and maybe Washington also is a pretty good team this year.
Well, that's why we have a measuring stick out on them right now.
Yeah.
And speaking of, we'll talk a little bit about this. Indiana is going to get their revenge spot going against Atlanta on Thursday night. They're a
Mhm.
3.5 point favorite on the road, 171.5 up to 172. It's you'll see mostly 3 or 3.5s. Indiana's the favorite. Got to remember, Atlanta just beat them.
Yep.
And they beat them on the road, 91-90. Yeah, they're going to say, "Oh, this is a quick turnaround in Indiana." Do we really know how good Atlanta is? So you're getting a lot of hype on every Caitlin Clark game. And I want to address an issue that happened a couple days ago, and I'm going to play a clip. Now, excuse me, folks, as I do this, because I am not a professional producer, but I'm going to swing over to a clip of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, which is the dynamic hate game. I don't know what's going on, but they just don't seem to like each other. And watch this play. This clip off of show here. Here we go. The girl can shoot.
I'm not seeing anything on my screen, Jim.
Here comes the play. Watch this little thing here. Well, she pushes the other girl off and there's no foul.
Yeah, see, I'm not seeing it, but I do recall the play. And did you show the part where Reese pushed one of Caitlin Clark's teammates out of the way so she could get
Here,
closer
is
to the
this a
basket?
flagrant foul or is that a basketball play?
What Clark did, I thought, was a flagrant foul, but it was the retaliation, I think, for what Reese did, pushing her
Yes.
teammate out of the way to get position. So it's kind of like in football where the second player is the one who gets flagged because the refs didn't see what the first player did to precipitate in this case, the flagrant foul. So now I
What
think a
Reese,
lot of these things are reviewable. That one should have been reviewed.
Reese did by pushing the girl in the back, pushing her away, that's not a basketball play.
Exactly.
What Caitlin, I'm not defending Caitlin here. I'm not here to do that. But what she did was she tried to knock the ball out of her hand.
Yeah.
It was a foul, no question. Was it a flagrant foul? I doubt that. I just don't see that. But there's a lot of stuff going on in the WNBA, that we'll get rid of that. In the WN where they build up this, I don't know if it's real or if they're staging it, but it's bringing in a lot of people and a lot of ink and a lot of media and this Reese and Clark battle. And of course there's a lot of, I don't know what it is, but it's interesting. It's a little annoying after a while, because the one thing, I mean, look, guys, and I know a lot of guys out there, oh, well, I'm not going to watch college women's or not WNBA basketball. Those girls can't play. Well, if you're comparing them to men and, Brunson and all those guys, no, they're not the same. But this is a good sport, and they play hard. And you know that they're going on the floor each night. There's no load management, guys. They're also only making like what, 150 to 250 a year. It's not the 40, 50 million some of the stars in the NBA are making. These people are trying to make a living. And, the kids come in from college and it pushes them out of the league, because the stars come in from college. They're young. It happens in every sport. But then they go from making, let's say, 150 a year to saying, okay, now who do I play for? What do I do? Go to Europe? Yeah, some of them do go to Europe and play. So it's a whole different mindset. And but it's good stuff, and I love it. And every place Caitlin goes, they get 15 to 30,000 or 25,000 people.
You and I are old enough to remember what women's college basketball looked like in the 1980s, when it was starting to get coverage. ESPN had just been around a few years. It was difficult to watch because it looked like you didn't have the smoothness that you saw in the NBA. You saw a lot of like hesitation. You'd stop, they'd dribble, they'd stop, and the quality of play has increased 1,000-fold, if not more, over the last several decades. And these ladies have great fundamentals. There's a lot of, I think the word I was looking for, fluidity. It used to look like you used to do the thing with the cards, and you'd flip the little images and you'd get like a little motion picture. That's what it used to look like. It used to be herky-jerky. Now there's a great deal of fluidity. The talent level is great. The passing ability, the positioning and everything. Women's basketball has come a long way, and it's certainly from a betting perspective, the more we can bet on, the more we're going to watch, the better these leagues are going to flourish. And I don't know if anyone has done a study, Jim, maybe you heard, but the effect of legalized gambling in the U.S. and what has that done to the television ratings in places where gambling used to not be legal and now is legal. As far as I'd have to think that those ratings, and sometimes it's difficult to compare, but I'd have to think the ratings with all the new people in the wagering market and wanting to watch their money in action has to have had a positive effect overall when you break everything out from the other factors that could go into determining ratings.
Well, TV has a lot to do with, and a lot of these games in the WNBA are on television now.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can go on TV and you can watch an NBA game, a hockey game, a WNBA game, and maybe another one of those. But you can have a 4-box on your TV and you're watching all the games at once. They're getting a lot of recognition. They've expanded the league. I love it. More betting opportunities than last year.
I think, by the way, I think they've expanded the league, not just in adding the Valkyries, but I think, what are we up to, 44 games now? I think they increased the number of games.
They're all playing 44, and then, of course, they'll go to the playoffs. And you're getting, the WNBA, yes, they're not the same as the NBA, but the NBA, they play too many games, in my opinion. 80-some games. They take off. A lot of guys take off like 20 games. Yeah. So you go to the stadium, you pay all this money to go, and they're sitting on the bench, or they're not even there. So I think the NBA has a lot more cleaning up to do.
I have a radical suggestion for what the NBA can do, and I say radical because nobody's going to like it. But if you're concerned about load management, what you do, something like the NHL sort of does, and what you do is you award points for which team wins each quarter. So there are 4 points to be gained by winning a quarter, and then you add 2 points for whoever wins the game. When you do that, and it affects the number of points, like they do in the NHL, how many points you get, 2 for a win, one for an overtime loss, etc. And what that'll do is that'll decrease load management, because all of a sudden, if it's a competitive quarter with a minute and a half to go, and you need to overcome a 4-point deficit, that point is now worth something. So it is radical, but I think it would make more for entertainment, because you have a lot more competitive plays in these blowout games. Because let's say you're down by 20 at halftime, okay? And let's say you're 0-2 because you lost both quarters. Well, you can still come back, and even if you end up losing the game, you can still get some benefits out of it if you outscore your opponents in quarters 3 and 4, even if you still lose the game. It's radical. It'd be called gimmicky. But if we're seeing blowouts, and again, it affects ratings. People will still watch the game saying, we're losing by 20, but we can still win these next 2 quarters and pick up 2 points on Philadelphia, or whatever the case may be. And, look, it's all about money, and money is all about ratings, and ratings are all about providing competitive matchups.
Excellent. I mean, thinking like that, thinking outside the box, those kind of things eventually, I mean, like in college basketball, college football, we've gone from 4 teams to 12 teams in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. In the NBA, they have that midseason deal where they came up with, and the players do play hard for that, because they're playing for $500,000 to win that little tournament that they have. I mean, there are things that we can do to make it better. I'd like to see the style of play be a little bit better. I like, there's a lot of things that you can do. I mean, over the years, I mean, you saw baseball, they put in the bigger bases, they put a time clock on the pitchers. They were only letting the starters go 5-6 innings.
They put in that coach runner in the start of the 10th inning of an extra innings game, which is the dumbest rule in the history of sports.
I agree with that one. But as you make changes, you're going to make changes that are good ones, and you're going to make changes that are bad ones. We got to switch over. There is another league that in another sport, and I'm putting it up on the screen right now, and it's called baseball. And we're going to go over to that at the moment here. Let's take a look at what's going on today in baseball. And Andy, you said even before we started, there's a lot of good stuff going on in baseball today.
Yeah, and when you take a look at today's schedule, this was I guess it's live, so people have an opportunity to react if they can do it in the next 20 minutes or so, or not 20 minutes, but the next couple of hours, because there are a lot of games that start early in the day today. I think 1, 2, 3.
Well, the
4,
Pittsburgh
5.
game starts in 2 hours.
Right, and I think there are 8 games overall that start before 1 p.m. Pacific time. That still leaves a lot of room for some of the other games to play. And there are a number of good matchups today. I'm looking at, and I'll concentrate on the evening matchups because those are the ones that most people.
Let me shoot this out there right away. Yesterday, I played Pittsburgh in Cincinnati, first 5 under and full game under. I had 2 winners on that.
I did that same thing the night before when we talked about that San Francisco Kansas City game, and it was the same type of game. First 5, full game. Game ended up 3-1.
I'm gonna do the same thing again today with these two. So there's a game, starts in 2 hours. Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Singer against Heaney. Opened 8 over, actually, and now it's 7.5 or 8 under. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna go first 5 under, first and full game under. So there's 2 free plays right there off the top.
Let me. I'm gonna say, let me see what the first 5 innings are in that game, because when we see that number go down, we are seeing it's a reasonable number. You'll see a 3.5 for a game that's at 7.5 or so. This one is at 4. It is juiced to the under. But I think if you've got 2 pitchers that you like and 2 teams right now, neither of which is really hitting. I mean, I think Cincinnati lost. I think that was its 4th 1-0 game that they've lost this year. So that's the way that I would go as well. I'm a little concerned about it, and the reason I'm not playing it is that neither pitcher, especially Singer, is not in very good form. And sometimes when you have something like that, you'll have a team like Pittsburgh that's struggling, saying, "Oh, we're going up against a batting practice pitcher today. He's put up some awful numbers over his last 3 starts and for the season." And he came over after having had a very good career starting out in Kansas City. He put several good seasons together, and I was surprised that he left Kansas City, but maybe the Royals knew something.
Well, Andy, we're looking at about 15 minutes left in the show.
Right.
So why don't you move on, see what you got, and I'll just jump in.
All right. I like the way that this Smith Shawver pitcher is going for Atlanta, and Atlanta really stuck in a funk offensively. They miss Acuna, who we still don't know exactly when he's coming back. He's going up against Washington. Williams is the starter for Washington. He started off the year pretty well, but he's not been pitching well of lately. They are a modest favorite tonight. At least, let me see where that line
150,
has come.
155, 160.
Yeah, which is considering the contrast in the pitching styles and the fact that Atlanta's coming off of a poor effort. I generally, Atlanta's not hitting well enough right now for me to suggest a run line play on this, laying the 1.5, because they may only score 3 runs, which means they can't give up more than 1. But it might be a team that I would either look to lay that minus 150 or so if you can find it out there. I don't know that you might be able to, although I am seeing a 150 at a significant place offshore, but that may not necessarily be current. So I would look at maybe put them in a parlay with another heavy favorite. Looking at the other 3 games, boy, the Dodgers are just not playing very well right now. They've
No.
what are they, like 9-16 or something like
Andy,
that?
I got to be on. I got to be honest with you. I got to be on Arizona with Burns in that game.
Yeah.
I'm taking a price. They're playing as good. I mean, there's only 4-game difference in win column, and the Dodgers aren't doing it right now.
And Burns is pitching his best baseball I've seen. Remember, he came over from what was it, Baltimore, I think, last year, and so he's getting familiar with Arizona, which has a lot of offense. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. That'll be in my portfolio.
I want to
today
jump
as well.
up. I want to jump up the card a little bit. I know I'm rushing here a little bit because we have time constraints. Texas is playing the Yankees. They're in Yankee Stadium. You got some pretty good pitchers in DeGrom, and when he's right, he is right. He's been hurt a lot in his career, but when he's right, he is so good. I mean, this game opened 7.5 over. Now it's 7.5 under. I'm doing the same thing I did with the Pittsburgh-Cincinnati game. I'm taking first 5 under, full game under.
Yeah, and that also right now has a number of 4 for the first 5 innings. Yarbrough, who pitched a good part of the last several seasons with Kansas City, has come over for the Yankees, expected to be used out of the bullpen, but also as a spot starter. And he's had success as a starter, and I think the Yankees will use him. They won't do what a lot of these openers are doing, where they come in for 1 inning and the first inning and 5 or 6 hitters, and then they bring in the guy who was expected to start to go the next 5 or 6 innings. Yarbrough is capable of going 5 innings. Of course, DeGrom had all his success crosstown with the Mets, so I'm sure that he'll get a very nice reception by at least a good part of the Yankees crowd, because a lot of the Met fans go to Yankee games when they see a lot of their ex-players coming in. So I could certainly make a case for playing Texas as a very, very small underdog in this game, and I do like the play on the under that you suggest as well, especially for the first 5.
There's no question. I'll be on Texas as well for a bet. There's no question. Is there anything out here on the card besides these guys that we talked about?
Well, yes. Yeah, and in fact, I talked about looking for a team to perhaps put in a parlay with Atlanta.
Okay.
Now, I don't necessarily like going for a team that. Let me just make sure. I believe it's a 3-game series that they're playing with the Mets and Red Sox, with the Red Sox having won a pair of low-scoring games. But Crochet, who was the much prized off-season subject of trades, ended up a brilliant season with the White Sox last year. Boston ended up getting him, and he's lived up to billing. He's been outstanding in his first 8 or 9 starts. He's about a $1.45 favorite going up against McGill of the Mets, who has been struggling lately. He had performed well early in the season. He's not in good form right now. Neither of these teams are really hitting, so this could be a low-scoring game. I'm not going to look under. I'm going to look to put Crochet in there with Smith Shawver of Atlanta. Basically a 2-team straight up parlay, or non-run line parlay of a pair of minus 150 teams. And I think that, I don't know exactly what that pays, but it pays, I think, maybe about 1.75 or something like that. But that'll be the other one I'll be playing along with Texas. The other one, and it's early game, but I do like the form that Paddock is in. I'm not quite sure when this game will start. I think it's listed now for actually 12:30, because they're completing the suspended game from Monday night after yesterday's attempt and the regular game yesterday was rained out. So the original matchup for yesterday, Williams and Paddock, is going today. It's scheduled for 12:30 because I think they're starting around 10 o'clock Pacific time to finish that game, which was suspended heading to the top of the fourth inning. So you do have a few extra hours to get out, and you're only laying about $1.13 or so. The one caution I have, and I'm sort of going to be rooting for Cleveland in game one. Minnesota had that 13-game winning streak ended in this last game. And so often you see teams that when they're on an extended winning streak, and you can say 6 games, 8 games, whatever it is, but 13 games is clearly an extended winning streak. When such a long winning streak or losing streak ends, very often the result that ended the streak follows up in the next game, meaning that it wouldn't be a surprise if Minnesota lost that next game. Now, you have had time off with that suspended game not being completed. Maybe it doesn't come into play. But if Cleveland wins the first game, I'll feel a little bit better about Minnesota in the second game. But if this line does not move, I'm still going to back Paddock against Williams. Paddock came up as a highly touted prospect with the Padres a number of years ago, never quite lived up to billing. Maybe, and we've seen a lot of players develop later in their careers, in their late 20s, as they approach 30, into the kind of form that was expected of them. Look at Sandy Koufax, who was one of the greatest pitchers of all time. He couldn't find the plate the first 5 or 6 years of his career when he came up with the Brooklyn Dodgers. And then, 61, or I think it was 61 that maybe he started to become the pitcher we all know today. I'm not going to say Paddock is going to be that, but he could be a kind of pitcher who develops late in his career after not living up. So I'll be on Minnesota most likely if the line does not move significantly.
I'm going to make a couple announcements here, Andy. We've got Greg De Palma and I are going to do our first touch at pro football. I'm not sure, we might touch on college as well, but we're going to do that Friday. We do know about 90 days away, we're going to have some football season going on. Andy and I are going to continue with the money management. But when we talk about money management, it's going to be money management and exotic bets like parlays, teasers, round robins, because that's all part of using your money to. You got to remember something, that when we bet on sports, we're betting on sports as if it's an investment. So in reality, it's like playing the stock market, commodity market, the currency market. But in most of what we do is we're like day traders, unless you're betting futures. So Andy and I have to get together offline, script it out what we're going to talk about. And, right now during midseason, now we're not going to do a lot of podcasts. Greg is doing a lot of interviews with a lot of coaches and people around the various leagues, which is great stuff on Proline TV on YouTube. You go there, you're not going to believe the great insight that this channel has into what our lads does with all the players and the rankings and all that stuff. It's quality material and you pay nothing. It's all free. So if you don't go to YouTube, which you're on now, YouTube TV, and check out these other things that we're doing on there, you're missing the boat. So it's not all about looking at the day games. It's about looking down the road, learning something, because there's a lot of changes in pro football, and God knows with the nil and the portal, there's a lot of changes in college as well. So we're going to be touching on that. Greg touches on that with the interview.
I'll just add, the only thing that you're paying is with your time, and it'll be time well spent.
Absolutely. Andy, I think we're about ready to close out here. Anything that you want to add quickly?
Well, I mentioned the other day, as far as tonight's game against Pacers and Knicks, as I was going to look over the total, provided it wasn't above 224. And we're right at that level right now, so 223.5. I'll be on the over in that game. I'm going to expect to be a back and forth type game. The Knicks, Thibodeau's known for his defense, but, when you got the kind of players that he has, he's more comfortable saying, he's not a stubborn coach. Best example in the history of sports was Brian Billick. Came over from Minnesota to the Ravens. Brilliant offensive mind, led the Vikings, I think, to the year when they, at the time, led the league for the most points ever scored. Comes over, inherits a great defense, with the Baltimore Ravens. They ended up winning a Super Bowl very early in his tenure there. That's a coach who does what you're supposed to be. You don't necessarily put in a system according to what you like and what's worked for you. You put in a system that takes advantage of the best talent that you have, what they do best. You tailor a system around that. And I think a guy like Thibodeau is doing that, where he used to be a defensive mind back in his assistant days and his head coaching days elsewhere. And so the Knicks now are taking advantage of a lot of the talent that they have. And I expect this to be a very entertaining and perhaps more overs than unders when we get through the 6 or 7 games that the series goes.
In the series that went 6 games with Boston and the Celtics, what was the over and under situation there after those 6 games? Do you remember those numbers? I don't remember them.
I don't have them, but I'm going to go. If it goes very quickly, I can go take a look and see.
I know with the Indiana Pacers, they beat the Cavs. The Cavs, I don't know what the hell the Cavs are doing, but they never showed up.
The first Knicks game landed basically on the total, so it shows up perhaps as a push or an over, a push or could be an over. I actually look at it as an under because when I track my over-unders, not for betting purposes, but for statistical purposes, the game went overtime, tied at 100. So to me, I mark that down as an under. The second game with Boston also stay. And by the way, games don't go under; they stay under. They start under and they stay under until they go over. So just a little grammar there as far as that goes. If you want to clear the room and be the wise ass in cocktail parties, there's something.
Only a Ivy League graduate would know that.
The third game was Boston 115-93. That came very close. In fact, that was a middle. The total opened 205.5, ended 209.5. and landed 208. Then the fourth game was a high-scoring game. I think fourth game was a high-scoring game when New York was up 2-1, and they won 121-113. That went over the total by about 24 points. Then you had the final game game 5, where Boston won to make the series 3-2. Total was 208. Again, pretty much in line with the previous games. That ended up in regulation 127-102. So that was a high scoring game. And then the final game of the series, when Boston really didn't show up and they won by 38, the Knicks, that stayed under. That was a 200. The total was 211. So I'm going to look for these two teams to have a little bit of a pace. And again, it's a little different series. I mentioned that a number of these games for Boston stayed under. Why did they stay under? Because they took a lot of threes and missed a lot of threes. I don't see that imbalance.
We got two different basic styles here. Indiana likes to push the pace, and the Knicks like to grind it a little bit less. So we got one from column A and one from column B. Who's going to win that is going to determine a lot.
But if I were going to make a side play tonight, and I haven't decided yet, I want to see if this line goes up, I'd have to like Indiana. This team plays a lot of close games. They know how to win. They know how to protect leads to a great extent. I was just wishing we were getting like 5.5 or 6. I'd feel more comfortable.
Well, I'm betting the money line on the Knicks. I think they'll grind it out.
Both win.
The game. But we could both win. You could take the points. I mean, you can always buy it from 4.5 to 5, Andy.
Yeah, true.
So anyway, this was fun. We did a live show here. We don't usually do live shows. They usually have to record us because we make so many mistakes. But to
quote from a long-running series, live from Las Vegas, it's Wednesday.
The Playbook ATS show. No Mark today, no Greg today. It was just you and I, and they trusted us with us, Andy. So I think we did pretty well. And we'll chat soon. Thank you very much.
Good luck, everybody.
Bye-bye.